All right. Well, welcome everyone to the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy, from brought to you by 27 Degrees Consulting. And we want to recognize our sponsor, of course, Bay Coast Bank, which is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. Today, we're really pleased to have with us Dr. Dennis Barley. And Dr. Barley is going to talk to us a little bit about one of his passions, which is weight management. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Chris, for having me. Nancy, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm a chiropractor for the past 37 years. I have a specialty degree in chiropractic sports medicine, and also I am the vice president of healthcare strategy at a medically supervised weight management company called Ideal Protein. Mm-hmm. I incorporated it into my practice. It took off, and then they asked me to come on board and help other physicians learn how to use the protocol.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I have, what else? I have 3 sons, and one of them is a chiropractor in Rhode Island, and the other 2 are in the tech sector in Boston.
Nice.
Very good.
Now, how did you get interested in this field?
That's a great question. I would see patients, and what I say, first of all, Nancy, is this chose me. I didn't choose it. I would see patients, and I didn't know what to do with their weight. When they came to me and asked me about weight, I really didn't know what to do. I might have suggested a few things, but it's quite a vast area, and so I didn't have any direct avenue. And when I came across Ideal Protein, the science behind it just made total sense. The physiology that occurs in the body when we eat certain foods, and what we can do to help that really just fascinated me. I mean, it's natural for us to gain weight. It's an innate mechanism, a survival mechanism. So like other addictions out there, this one's kind of different because you don't need cigarettes, you don't need drugs, but you need to eat food. So it's a tough one to get involved in. And I just found a passion for it. I love the science behind it, and I wanted people to know that it's not their fault. This isn't a willpower issue. This isn't an issue where they're eating too much and working out less or what have you. It's a physiological hormonal mechanism within our body, and we can use food, believe it or not, as medicine to help change that situation. And so that's why I'm passionate about it.
I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Nancy.
No. Please.
I was just, getting back to the scope of the problem. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how big the scope of this issue is. I mean, I have a sense, of course, as a physician, but I'd like to hear it from you. And why? Why do we have so much of a problem in this country with obesity?
Oh my gosh! I mean, it's like an onion. You peel away the layers. There's so many layers to this. One thing that COVID did for this obesity is, number one, it's a disease, which many in the medical healthcare profession don't actually look at it as such. They look at the symptoms of that disease, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the cardiovascular disease, and they address that. So we're addressing symptom as opposed to getting to the cause of it.
Right.
But if you peel away the onions, this obesity pandemic just was magnified during COVID. Most people that are hospitalized or ventilated or succumb to the disease, and eventually die. One of the biggest factors is obesity. But I mean, if you look at the whole scope of it, it's monstrous. There's big food, there are food deserts. There's healthcare inequality in areas and food deserts that, create issues. It's the types of foods that we eat that create this bigger picture.
What do you mean by food deserts? Tell us about that.
Well, if you go to an impoverished area, in a city or what have you, there are less supermarkets there that have fresh fruit and vegetables.
Right.
And, you look at a convenience store, a bodega that has, highly processed foods, high in sugar, fat, and salt.
And that's the less expensive option often too.
Well, I know there's a little bit of a controversy on that, because if you really look at the big picture, yes, I suppose less expensive, easier, right? There's less areas in a city to exercise also. That's another factor. But less expensive, I suppose so. More convenient too. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's not less expensive anymore.
I mean, if you really do the math on it, it is actually not.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. The problem is commercials on television.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, they target us to eat those types of foods. And here's the problem again, physiologically, those foods taste good.
Right.
Because they appeal to our addiction center in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
They appeal, the sugar, fat, salt. We want those types of foods. Again, innate mechanism way back when we needed that sugar, to give us energy.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. You bring up the past. So if you went back, to 1,000 years ago or whatnot, we didn't see obesity like we see now, I would think. I mean, it's not described in the medical literature, at least.
50 years ago, we didn't see it. Right?
So what happened? I mean, is it the development of processed food that is the whole picture, or is there more to it than that?
I think it is. I think partially it is the development in processed foods. I think also, to be quite frank, I say this tongue in cheek, but we need to bring back home ec. We need to start teaching nutrition
That's such a good point.
in the schools,
Yes.
Right.
so that people know what foods they should be eating. Because we take our nutritional education from television mostly.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest problems. Get back into educating people on the right types of foods. Why I like the protocol that I do, the ideal protein, is we not only help people lose weight, but we move them into sustaining their weight and educating, giving tiny habits of behavioral change to make them successful long term, which is the holy grail of any weight loss program out there.
I mean, 1,000 years ago or so, when food was more scarce,
right?
And now it's very plentiful for many people. There probably was a reason that we would store all that. We could store fat.
Yes.
Humans would never store the amount of fat that they have now because there wasn't the availability of food at that time.
There probably weren't as many
it's quantity, but it's also quality and
too.
type. And it seems to me that, some of this made sense 2,000 years ago. It made sense to store some fat 2,000 years ago when you didn't know if you were going to get a meal that day. But, now in the way the world is, it doesn't make sense anymore. Right. So our physiology is maladapted to our current environment or society. That's my take on it.
This is true. I mean, our physiology is, it's an innate survival mechanism for us to store that energy, utilize what we need, and then store the rest as fat. Yeah. The problems today, as Nancy just said, we're sedentary. We're sitting around. Right. We're playing video games.
Right.
If you talk about the obesity during COVID for children,
right,
the prevalence of childhood obesity jumped from 19% before COVID to now 22%. That's actually a prevalence of a decade's worth.
Wow.
That's significant.
Sure.
And so, it is the comfort foods that we eat because, again, it's an innate mechanism. We eat those foods for survival, but physiology and environment now are out of balance.
There's a lot of things like that if you think about it, right? The whole fight or flight mechanism. I was thinking about this the other day. You think back thousands of years ago, that existed because you'd be walking through a jungle and there'd be a tiger that would jump out at you, and you needed to immediately get your heart rate up and be able to get out of that situation. But there are no tigers anymore. They're not wandering through the cities. We do have issues where we need that fight or flight mechanism, but not on a daily basis like probably our ancestors dealt with it. So there's a lot of times where our physiology doesn't match kind of where we are as a society currently. And this is probably part of one of those this is one of those examples.
So it all again it's a peel of the onion. It's part of the whole complex. This obesity is a complex chronic disease, and it's the foundation actually for all the other diseases.
I
So,
agree 100%. I think a lot of doctors are seeing that now
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
I mean, I think, years ago we didn't understand it as well, and we looked at it as a willpower issue. But we
Mhm.
really, I think most doctors who are enlightened now realize that this is a disease. And
Yeah.
it's the root of many other diseases: diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, stroke,
Mhm.
etc. I can go on and on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you just circled back to something I had wanted to ask Dr. Barley as well. So one of your statements fascinates me. It's not our fault. Can you
Yes.
kind of talk a little bit more about that? Because I consistently beat myself up when my weight yo-yos.
Sure.
I'm like, I should have, had the willpower, like you were
Right.
just saying.
Sure.
Right. Okay, so that's a great question, and the way I look at it, this is not there's hope for anyone who has a weight issue. First of all, it's not about your weight. It's not how you look. It's about that unhealthy weight that creates those comorbidities that make us ill.
Right.
Doesn't give us a quality of life, doesn't give us the quantity of life.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing. Not how you look, not vanity, but health. And so
Great.
we are, why it's not your fault is because, as we were just discussing, it's a physiological mechanism. If we are not, if we consume the wrong types of calories, if we consume the wrong types of foods and too much of those foods, which is kind of a vicious circle because they are addictive. So as we consume simple sugars, basically simple carbohydrates, and not adequate enough protein to feed our lean muscle or our lean tissue, mostly muscle, which is the engine that burns our calories. And we don't get adequate healthy fats. We're not gonna have a sustained healthy weight. So unfortunately, what we were talking about just a minute ago is television tells us to eat those foods, which are weight gaining foods.
So can you explain why the calories aren't all on the same playing field? So if
yeah.
I have a candy bar that's exactly 210 calories, I know I look at those labels on those wrappers, but I have a portion of chicken that's 200 calories.
Yes.
What happens that's processed differently?
What's the difference? That's a great question. So, in science, you'll get some kickback on a calories and a calorie, not a calorie. But the way this is true. A calorie is a calorie, but how the body utilizes that calorie is the important thing. So, if we eat that candy bar, first of all, when I turn that candy bar over and I look at the label, I don't look at the calories as much as I look at the serving size.
Oh, yes.
Does that candy bar mean 2 servings? So when I read that label, am I reading, oh my gosh, I've got to double that?
That's
One.
so important to realize.
The second thing I look at is the carb count minus the fiber,
Mhm.
because that's your total net carb count.
Okay.
And it's the carbohydrates that stimulate a hyperglycemia, blood glucose increase, which then stimulates the fat storing hormone, which is insulin. And when we bump up insulin, the body goes into that survival mechanism we talked about, and it stores that fat because we're not going to if we're sitting at a desk, we're not going to utilize all of those calories for energy. We're going to store most of them, especially if in that carbohydrate, because insulin's been boosted up in the body, and the body says, hey, insulin's high, let's take that and store it as fat.
So then, can I negate those? I don't know if you call them bad calories or not, by just hopping on the treadmill for a half hour.
That's a great question. If they say if you lose, research shows that if you run a marathon, you've dropped about a pound of fat. What happens?
I have to run a marathon to drop a pound of fat?
Yeah. So what happens when you cross that finish line? What do they give you to drink?
Water.
Sugar water.
Sugar water.
They give you Gatorade, and I don't mean to disparage any names here, but they give you things that are high in sugar again. So it's kind of defeatist. I mean, we always say, you can't outrun the fork.
Yeah, that's right. That's a
and
great expression. we talked about this in one of my little 2-minute things at one point.
Yes.
We do a 2-minute Tuesday, just summary on a few things. We
Mhm.
talked about weight management at one point. And what I've noticed, this is all anecdotal, but from taking care of patients for over 20 years,
Mhm.
is that when people try to lose weight by just exercise, they never do.
Mhm.
And I'm not disparaging the need or the utility of exercise, because I think it's critically important for our health.
Mhm.
Absolutely. We should be exercising regularly. And that can just be walking. It doesn't have to be high level exercise by any means. But I find when people exercise regularly and they're doing that for weight loss, they tend to, on the other end, just consume more calories. And if you're gonna work on weight management, you have to look at what you're taking in,
Mhm.
not just what you're doing for exercise. Do you agree with that? Please tell me if you
Yeah,
don't.
no,
But
no question about that. First of all, exercise is great for your cardiovascular
Absolutely.
health and everything. And also, believe it or not, it's really good for insulin resistance.
Mm.
I mean, you can help your insulin. The problem with most people today that have unhealthy weight is that they're insulin resistant,
Right.
meaning that their cells are not accepting insulin. So there's a shunting of energy over to their fat cells. But that exercise is important. But again, you have got to pay attention to what you put in your mouth. No question.
yeah, you can't exercise enough to make up for bad eating. I don't want to say if habit is the right word, but
Right.
I agree 100%. And I'm glad you brought up fiber, because fiber is so critically important.
Right.
We recommend that to our diabetics a lot because it really smooths out their glycemic control
Right.
often.
Right.
It does help a lot with, I think in some instances with weight loss too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think fiber is crucially important, and it's something we don't think about a lot when we're thinking about weight management, but it's important.
The thing is about this whole diet education, behavioral change, modification, and educating kids and everyone else about how to eat. I was just speaking with a patient the other day, and they were talking about a shake that they made.
Yeah.
And if I just told you what was in it, cacao, a banana, dates, chia seeds for fiber, et cetera, et cetera. You'd think, that's pretty healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the glycemic impact, the sugar bang up that'll come because of drinking that's problematic. To your point, if we added a protein powder to that, if you add protein to that glycemic index, change some of those fruits.
Yeah.
Take away the banana, take away the dates, and maybe use berries instead. Blackberries, raspberries. Utilize those. Now you have a healthier shake. It's not as glycemically sugar loaded.
Right.
That's going to spike insulin. That's going to have you store fat. So many things that we think are healthy. Orange juice. I always do this. Stay away from orange juice.
Yeah.
It's 10 to 12 teaspoons of orange juice in an 8-ounce glass.
Of sugar, you mean? Yeah.
Sugar.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's similar. I wanted to say this, but it's similar to a Coke.
Yeah.
So there's certain things, but eat the fruit. The fruit is okay because of the fiber, right? So we add fiber to something, we add protein to something, and we make that food a healthier food.
Is the sugar in fruit processed a different way than if you add like 10 sugars to your coffee?
You mean like fructose versus
Like
sucrose?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of studies now on fructose and the cycling down to uric acid. I don't want to go down into that pathway, but yeah, fructose affects the liver differently than other sugars. But quite frankly, again, it's the fiber in fruit that actually makes it not a bad thing.
So like, where do I start? So I wake up today, I'm like motivated. I'm like, okay, today's the day. I'm going to live a healthier lifestyle. There is so much out there that's so confusing. Many different diets, keto diet, intermittent fasting, that. Like, where do I know which way to turn and how do I start?
Some down the road, I'll show you a slide and show you the ideal protein difference. What I do think is I think that a program that you do should not be commercial. It shouldn't be do it yourself. It should be, monitored, overseen by a healthcare professional. That's the way I think. because there are contraindications to dieting too. So there has to be an awareness, somebody monitoring your or someone's process through the diet. So that's what I would say up front.
Can you give an example of what you mean by a contraindication to dieting? Are we talking maybe about diabetics who might be on a certain medication, and if they cut their calories and change up their diet, they might have to get their medication adjusted?
Yeah. Many times type 1 diabetics, if you put them on a keto protocol that's too keto, they can have really severe issues. You'd never put someone pregnant or nursing on a diet either. But so there are some there are other indicators. Someone who's taking lithium, you've got to be careful with that, et cetera. So there are contraindications to doing certain diets. In the protocol that we do have an alternative protocol that is higher in carbohydrate count for cardiovascular patients, for type 1 diabetics, and for adolescents. So, of course, always monitored with their prescribing physician. Yeah.
So then where is a good place to start? Like, okay, so I'm motivated now. I wake up. Chris has told me I have to lose weight. So
I wouldn't go there.
He's staying real quiet now.
There are no knives on the table, right?
So I'm not like, what are some of the things like I should keep as far as habits go, and maybe some of the things I should change? Like, is breakfast the most important meal of the day? Should I drink water, or am I looking at drinks like any 0-calorie drink is the same as water?
Should you do intermittent fasting?
Exactly.
Should you do keto?
Exactly.
Right.
There's so many different ways to go.
There are so many ways to go, and the advice I'd give you is, here, take my card. But the real advice that I would give you is, honestly, use your scientific brain. Go and get some advice from someone who is doing a protocol, not just a diet, not just a commercial diet, but a protocol that actually has some substantiated evidence behind it. We just recently had two published studies in peer-reviewed journals that showed that our diet was superior to the American Heart Association diet when it came down to certain cardiovascular risk factors.
Why?
Yeah, that was the journal was Obesity Medicine and Practice, or something along those lines. But that, and then there was another study done up in Canada, University of British Columbia, that showed that utilizing a protocol, there could be de-prescribing, diabetic medications. So I would do something that has some evidence behind it, so you're on the right track. You're using your scientific mind, because it is pretty. Once you start on the road of learning what foods to avoid and what foods to eat, you will start losing the weight. The hardest part is the loss of weight, and actually then it gets a little harder with maintaining that weight. What we did, we had a physician develop this program, and then a dietitian came in and developed the last 2 phases, because 10 years ago, when I started using it in the practice, we would see patients coming in and they need 10 to 15 pound weight loss. Today, it's 50 to 60.
Right.
And what we started noticing too in the early years is there was this regain occurring. And it's the bane of all weight loss and everybody's. The fact of the matter is we can help that now with this program. We have a proprietary program called the macro code. We develop your macro code after you lose the weight. We develop a macro code. So you'll know what foods, how many servings of those foods you need to eat to sustain weight loss long term.
Before I dive in and ask you to really walk us through your phases and explain a little bit more on the physiology behind the program that that you do, I think it's a good time to break for our commercial.
Sure, great.
Primacare is Southeastern New England's trusted leader in medical care. With offices in Fall River and surrounding communities, we're dedicated to your well-being. Our carefully selected team of more than 150 providers offers world-class primary and specialty medical care. Primacare doctors are supported by a skilled staff trained to deliver comprehensive radiology, imaging, and testing services. Primacare is large enough to take care of all your medical needs, but small enough to care for you personally. Primacare is by your side.
All right, and we're back. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us again for the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy from 27 Degrees Consulting. And we're going to talk some more about weight management.
Yes, with our guest, Dr. Dennis Barley. Do you want to let us know at what point that you may want to use some of the slides that you brought
Sure.
to walk us through?
Yeah, we could
your
go over
program.
a couple of things just to kind of clarify, what I was talking about before.
Okay.
First of all, NIH said that only 12.2% of Americans have optimal metabolic health, meaning that, their metabolism is working the way it should. So that means 88% of us have an issue.
Why is it like that?
Again, all
Because
of
of
the
the
factors,
obesity?
because of the obesity.
Yeah.
All of the factors that add up to this obesity pandemic, which I call a hidden pandemic, is really, really working that number. 88% of us.
I mean, physiologically, we weren't meant to consume the amount and the type of calories that we consume.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Our physiology is not set up to deal with the land of plenty.
Right.
So
The land of plenty and the types of plenty that we receive,
Yes.
that we're kind of pseudo addicted to. If you
Right.
will. Yeah.
exactly.
And then, so, right now, we're 70% of us are overweight or obese. And about 8 years from now, they say that 50% of the population in the U.S. will be obese.
Oh, geez.
Not just overweight, but obese. And that's quite significant.
Hmm.
So the reason why we have those issues is that it's the sugar story, right? 4 grams of carbs becomes a teaspoon of sugar in the body. So a slice of bread has 20 grams of carbs or 5 teaspoons of sugar. Eat a sandwich and you've got 10 teaspoons of sugar.
Hmm.
You wouldn't go to a sugar bowl and just start eating 10 teaspoons. But that sugar then is used for energy in the body. And then the rest of it is pushed into storage when insulin runs high in the body.
I'll speak for myself, I guess. I don't realize this. Like when I'll sometimes just grab a piece of bread I'm going to say all my bad habits now in front of you.
That's okay. That's
But,
fine. It's,
like when you
great.
grab a piece of bread and maybe I put a little bit of peanut butter on it and that's like my little snack. I'm not thinking, oh my God, all this sugar that I'm processing. I think so much of what I do, and I imagine other people, is just mindless.
Right.
eating.
Sure.
It is mindless. Yeah. So, that's the thing. There has to be an awareness of what we're putting into our body, and we're going to get better out of our body if we put in the right foods.
I think that's a great slide because it just kind of makes you stop and think for a minute.
Yeah. In one of my, I do some workshops occasionally. One of my workshops I showed what a typical day on an American diet would be. And it was
Sounds like the next horror
story.
story.
Great. It was a horror story because the bag that I used, it had this much sugar in it.
Oh, wow.
And the bag we should be eating, this plastic bag should be about
Like a
this
snack
much.
size.
Well,
Oh my goodness.
I see a lot of people who, drink their calories too.
Yes.
They'll go. That's a whole issue,
It
right?
is. It is.
They say they're not consuming much, but then when they go and have their large Dunkin' Donuts coffee, they put 7 sugars in it,
Yeah.
and that's very common.
absolutely.
Crazy stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of maladaptive behaviors and habits that we've developed as Americans, and it's always shocking for people to understand that we're such an unhealthy society compared to other societies. Even though we have the most advanced healthcare system in the world, we're incredibly unhealthy.
Right. Very.
It's shocking, actually.
Yeah, it is shocking. The 7 most obese countries in the world we're probably number 1 or 2. Mexico and we were neck and neck for years. So then when you consume that sugar, then what happens is insulin, the pancreas produces this hormone called insulin that rises, and then the overproduction of insulin lowers its sensitivity. And then all of a sudden we gain weight and we gain these comorbidities. The problem with insulin, the problem with hormones in the body is it's a sea of hormonal chemistry in our body, but every hormone has a relationship to the other.
Mhm.
So when we have high insulin in the body, of course, we become leptin resistant. And leptin is the hormone, that our fat cells tell our brain, hey, you're full. So that's that vicious cycle I talked about earlier, is that when we eat a carb, it begets another carb. When you eat a carbohydrate-laden breakfast, and at 8 in the morning and at 10 in the morning, you're starving, you're looking for more.
Right.
If you eat a satiating, protein-based, and I'm not going down the road of, hey, we're all protein, but you eat a fairly good protein-based meal at 8 o'clock, you're probably getting hungry at about 11:30, 12, which is more natural. So there are certain foods that we can avoid to stop that vicious cycle of hyperglycemia, hyperinsulinemia, then hypoglycemia, and looking for more sugar.
Right.
We can stop that cycle. So, the big difference is that in the diets that we do, is if I were to show you this chart over here, and some of the colors are missing, but you can pretty much get a good idea. If we look at that chart, there's a regular balanced diet all the way to the left, and it has all the macronutrients. A macronutrient is your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. And then it has all the micronutrients that we need to sustain ourselves. If we look at a hypocaloric commercial diet out there, the 3 fatal flaws with that diet, that's the next one there. Yeah. The problem with that diet is we've decreased all of the macros and the micros so that we're not getting what we need. If we're not getting enough protein, we're not going to have the engine available to burn those calories. And so why people sometimes lose weight really well but regain it back is because they haven't sustained their lean mass. They haven't sustained the engine that burns the calories.
Is this like the crash diets that you got to fit in a dress by the weekend or something so you'll starve yourself?
Those are more the
Yes.
yo-yo crash diets, and they're unhealthy. They're very unhealthy. As you can see, not enough micronutrition to help run the body. Too many carbohydrates still. When there's too many carbohydrates, the body will go to that first to burn energy. So it'll always look for a carbohydrate to burn energy first. What we're trying to get the body to do in the ideal protein diet is burn fat. Here's the thing everyone is doing today, a DIY, do-it-yourself keto.
Right.
Keto is huge. It's a big buzzword out there. The problem with those diets is that my diet is different than Chris's diet at home than your diet. So doing it yourself keto could be anything. And is a double cheeseburger with bacon on top, no bun, something healthy to eat? Not necessarily.
Right.
So we're talking about 70% of that diet is fat. And are we diminishing the amount of protein because we're concentrating on fat? And of course, yes, they do have less carbs, so you will lose on all of these diets. But again, the macronutrients aren't the same. If I go, if I go to the hypocaloric diet, I can give you a hypocaloric diet that's fun. I could say eat 500 calories a day of ice cream, but you're not going to be healthy.
Right.
You will lose weight. But you will not be healthy. So the point when Dr. Tran, the developer of Ideal Protein, when he put it together, he said, let's give adequate protein. Not overabundant. We're not going over the top. We're just giving adequate protein for that person's weight, that person where they are now. We're going to give low healthy fats. And we're going to make sure the carbohydrates are restricted but not diminished. And we're making sure that all of the micronutrition is there so the body's physiological processes can actually run the way they should. So when you do an ideal protein diet, your macros and micros are where they should be. And that's a healthy diet.
I don't understand fully what you mean when you say macro and micro.
Oh,
Can
sorry.
you talk
Okay, so
about that?
the macros, I know you understand it, but so a macro is something like a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat.
Mhm.
And the micros are your micronutrients, like your what we add back into because we're eliminating certain foods. We'll add back in some calcium and magnesium and potassium and multivitamin and a good omega-3, fish krill oil. So we'll add those back into the diet to make sure that that person is getting all that they need while they're dieting. Once we move through the weight loss phase and the doctor's happy where you're at, and you're happy as a patient where you're at, then we move you into the phase 2, which is our stabilization. We're going to try to stabilize your weight. What are we going to do? We're going to add back in more complex carbohydrates, some of the foods that you were missing before. We're also going to know at the end of the weight loss phase how many servings of protein and fat you need to sustain yourself. But also we retitrate those, we add back in those carbohydrates weekly. And all of a sudden we may hit a spot where you're gaining a little more. And what our key factor here, which was developed by Kevin Hall out of the NIH when he did studies on The Biggest Loser, was those patients were getting hungry and they were craving foods. If you're starting to get into that phase, we drop you back down. I'll give you myself as an example. In phase 2, my stabilization is 6.5 protein servings, 6 to 8 fat servings, and I'm at 55 grams of carbohydrate daily.
Okay.
And so when I follow that, I sustain and hold on to my weight. And then I learn over time that, in my maintenance phase of how to eat. So I know what a plate should look like for me. I know what types of foods and the amounts of foods I should eat so I can hold on to the weight loss that I achieved. And it takes about 5 to 7% total body weight loss that'll make your unhealthy weight healthy. It can bring you back into health. 10%, usually is for those fatty liver patients. But we say 5 to 10%. If you lose that much of your total body weight, you've actually done a really good thing for yourself, a real good thing for your health.
Yeah, for diabetics, we find type 2 diabetics who are overweight, 10%, hypertensives, 10%. All of those things will often return, not to normal maybe, but certainly be much improved. So it's an achievable goal for many people.
It is. Let's say someone is 300 pounds. They've done diets. They've done 20 diets throughout their life, and we tell them initially 30 pounds. A lot of times, I can do that standing on my head. So it becomes attainable. Get to that first step. If you want to go further, and your doctor thinks you want to go further, then that's fine. But the first step is try to gain that 10% reduction.
So you talked a lot about foods. Are there superfoods that you love and like foods that you're like, oh, please don't go near these foods?
Oh my goodness. Well, your central aisles of the grocery store are where all those carbohydrate laden, fat and salt laden, sugar laden foods are. So if you shop around the outside of the grocery store, you're in the better spot.
That's great. I never thought of that. That's so true.
You're picking up your proteins, your vegetables, your healthy fruits. So that's a plus. Quite frankly, when I did this 10, 12 years ago, one thing, I used to drink soda occasionally, not a lot, but occasionally, and I haven't had a soda in forever. And, water sustains life. It's something that we should probably just switch over to.
Where does alcohol fit in?
I was just going to ask about that.
I can feel it.
There you go.
I find people find it very hard to lose weight if they're having alcohol.
Yes.
In their diet.
Yes. So the some of the pushback we get from our protocol is in some of the others, those hypocaloric diets that say, well, as long as you get in X amount of whatever, you can drink your alcohol. I think it's a bad idea. And with our protocol, there's no alcohol in the first phase, 2 phases. You can get back to it, but not in the first 2 phases. First of all, alcohol lowers inhibition, and you're going to eat more. I know I do.
Yep.
You're going to throw caution to the wind, and you'll eat the foods that you shouldn't be eating. Second thing is that has an effect on your liver, and that would, that's,
of course,
that's not what you really want to do.
So if I
sorry about that.
Oh,
sorry,
no,
I just wanted to say one more thing. When we lose fat, we're burning that, we're processing that through the liver. And if we're going to be drinking at the same time, The body will take the action of, hey, you're consuming a poison, which is the alcohol. I'm going to address that first, and I'm going to slow down the breakdown of this fat. So that's why, again, it's not a good thing to do while you're doing a serious diet.
So I was gonna ask, if I come to see you, like, can you just walk me through
Sure.
like your phases and what this program looks like for me?
Sure. So we'll have you fill out a whole health profile like you would in any other doctor's office, and we would look for any contraindications or any issues where we'd have to address it with your prescribing physician. After we've done that, one of our coaches would take you. Our coach will take you through the protocol, what it looks like. Anywhere you'll purchase between 3 and 5 of our products, plus the supplements. So we use whole food initially. Okay, what I mean by that is stuff that you buy at the grocery store, but your grocery store bill will be reduced by 60%.
So then that really plays into the cost factor, because
Yes.
people are like, oh my
Yes.
God, I'm not going to be able to afford a program.
Exactly.
But it gets absorbed into what your usual grocery bill
Yes.
would look like.
Yeah, so think about you've decreased your personal grocery bill by 60%. You're not drinking alcohol, and you're not getting those fancy coffees. So your overall cost per week has gone down. Then you're going to consume those whole foods plus 3 of our partial meal replacements. Why partial meal replacements? Because you're getting adequate protein, you're getting reduced fat, you're getting diminished carbohydrates, so that we are giving you a program that's going to help your body start burning its own fat.
What's the definition of a partial meal replacement?
Partial meal replacement means that in combination with whole foods, we're going to use that as a tool to cross you over the bridge from carbohydrate, sugar burning into a fat burning stage, so that we can start burning your own fat.
So is this like protein powder?
Yeah, there's different things. We have a lot of different foods. We have soups, we have chili, vegetarian chili. We've got, believe it or not, we have bolognese. We have all different foods,
Great.
breakfast foods, oatmeal, etc. There are shakes, there are bars, but it's not a shake and bar diet. There's more foods. We're utilizing that, drinking plenty of water, and then from there, we decide how much. Let's go with 10% of total body weight, and then we move after that into phase 2, where we develop your macro code, and then we go into maintaining and sustaining that weight.
And again, my macro code is going to be different from yours and different from yours.
It's unique to everyone.
It's what kind of works for me and
Yes.
what gets my body in the best shape.
It's all based on your physiology. Mine's
That's great.
different than yours, different than Chris's.
What does the maintenance phase looks like? Because that's where probably a lot of people they start gaining those
Sure.
couple of pounds,
Yeah.
and a couple of pounds
Yeah.
just turns into the big yo-yo story.
So the maintenance phase looks like this. We try to try to set up about 17 visits over the entire year. If someone wants to come in weekly, there's no extra charge for that. That's up to them, whatever they feel comfortable with. But we suggest at least 17 over the year, initially weekly, then we move to every other week, then monthly, etc. What happens as we get back into life is we will start regaining. So we'll say, okay, it's time for a restart. When we do a restart or a reboot, whatever you want to call it, we might do that initial weight loss phase for a week. And then we get you back calibrated where you should be, and you're moving on from there. During that phase, we talk about we're talking more about exercises that'll keep your insulin low. We'll talk about behavioral changes, little tiny steps that you can make that helps you long term. So we do some behavioral modification work, and we try to get that patient to move through that so that they're empowered. It's no longer the unhealthy weight is no longer taken over their life. We've empowered them because we got to the physiological cause of why they were gaining weight, and now how they can live a life possible, if you will. A life that's better than they ever conceived, because the quality of life and their health is improved.
What I like about this program, it just seems so accessible. And like for a lot of different lifestyles, like if I'm busy and I'm on the run and I'm like, I don't have time to cook 3 meals or prepare 3 meals a day. It seems like you have some answers to that.
Well, those partial meal replacements are a part of that too. Not only are you getting the proper macros, protein, carb, and fat in
Right.
each of those meals, but it's simple. There's not a lot of planning that has to go into it.
Perfect.
And the thing is, it's really simple to do on the side. If you're doing it alone and you have a family, it's really simple just to do that on the side and still continue. So,
Well, the whole family kind of goes on a modified
well,
diet.
actually, quite frankly, even if let's say the other 3 in a 4-person family didn't do the protocol, only one did, the others tend to lose weight too because they're eating better. They're knowing what type of carbohydrates, fibrous, healthy, colorful vegetables. That should be a mainstay of the diet. Good, adequate protein, not hyperabundant protein, and really good fats.
So from start to finish, how long is your program? Or does that
Again,
depend?
it is an individual thing. So how long does it take to lose 10%? Well, men tend to lose anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds weekly. And of course, the first week with diuresis is a lot more. But as you know, on average, there's a study done out of Spirus, which is a huge medical hospital group network in central Wisconsin. They found that on average, women lose 2.5 pounds weekly and men lose 3.5 pounds weekly. But we see numbers that vary. So it could be a substantial difference from that. But if we know a person is not losing 2.5 to 3.5 pounds weekly, we can troubleshoot that and find out why, because physiology.
Did you write everything down?
The human body does not lie, right? That's what I love about it. Science is science, and you're gonna hit those numbers.
Are there psychological barriers or that come into play that you have to address sometimes?
Sure, that's a great question, and we do use some outside, references for anyone that we feel is not, needs extra help like that. Yeah, for sure. We count on, the counseling community to help out some of our patients. So that of course is an issue. Genetics is an issue. There's all types. There's many factors to this. Again, there's that onion that we're unpeeling.
Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed at how genetics play a role sometimes too, because I see families in my practice, and you see these families with these body types are all exactly the same.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily know what they're eating day to day.
Yeah.
But it's striking to me that 3 brothers look exactly the same and are, morbidly obese and have the same body type and all.
Yeah.
So there are genetic factors clearly at play sometimes.
There are genetic factors. I would say that, I think it's I would want to surmise that it's a lower percentage though. The reason why is a family might say, well, we all have cholesterol problems, or we're all big boned.
Yeah.
Right. We're all big boned. But the fact of the matter is that's been going on genetically epigenetically for a long time, and it changes over time. So do we actually have a real genetic issue? And there are.
I think there are, but if 80% of the
Yeah.
population is overweight or somewhere around there, then it can't all be genetic either.
It can't all be genetics. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you I guess this is a question for both of you. When you look at the height and weight charts, those are like 100% legit, because it seems like they're.
You know what? Here's what I say to that. I'll step in just because they're a parameter, right? There's something to look at. I will always be in the overweight category because I have a lot of lean mass. So I, at 165 pounds, will be at about a 25.4 or 26. That's considered overweight. But so they're not 100% accurate, but I think they're close enough.
They're a guide.
I think they're a good guide.
Yeah.
I think, people are shocked at what their ideal weight is, though. And I think one of the things you brought up is you don't want to use that and say, okay, here's your goal, your ideal weight. Yeah. Because people will not, they'll just be psychologically turned off from it. The 10% rule, I think, is great, because we know if you lose 10% of your body mass, if you're obese, you're going to have some significant physiological improvement, and your insulin resistance will decrease, your blood pressure may come down, all of that. So I never show someone their ideal body weight and say, this is what you got to do. Right. You got to get down to 155 pounds or whatever it may be.
And the other thing I would say to that is, there's some research out there that says the awareness, in an individual's awareness of where they are on the
Yes.
spectrum, they don't really know. About 37% were very shocked to find out actually where they were on
Yeah.
that chart, if you will. And that's discouraging. I'm actually on a board, a subset board of obesity medicine, which we did a screening tool for not only patients in the waiting room, but also it's visualized by their physician to show. So the patient was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the red zone or whatever zone it is.
Jeez.
And the physician can see,
Right.
okay, I think I need to address this.
Right.
And so the awareness is huge, both from the healthcare provider and on the patient themselves. I think it's something,
Yeah, and
It's quite-
I think it's really useful to show people where they are on a I guess a scale, so to speak. How are they? Are they morbidly obese? Are they obese? Where's their ideal weight? But I find it hard to say to someone, okay, your goal is to lose 80 pounds,
Right.
because it's gonna be overwhelming.
Right.
I try to take it in steps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. Make it easy. It's
Yeah.
the tiny little changes that will be more long lasting.
And little things like,
Yeah.
I tell patients, cut out soda. You're
Yeah.
going to lose a few pounds
Yeah.
right there a year.
Yeah.
You should not be having any fast food
Right.
because there's nothing good in there.
Right.
It's all nutrient devoid.
Yeah.
So, all that stuff makes a big difference. And some of this stuff is pretty easy to achieve.
It is. And boy, you just cut out soda, you can lose quite a bit of weight.
You lose a few
Yeah.
pounds, definitely,
For
from
sure.
that alone.
Can you share a success story as we start to kind of wind up the show?
Oh my goodness! It's so kismet that you say that, because this morning I got one of my colleagues sent me something. I can talk about patients in our practice, but I'm going to share this one. AXIA is a big medical group in the Midwest and also in the Philly, Jersey area. And we have a physician on our board who takes care of, she's a OBGYN. She and AXIA shared that the patient lost 208 pounds.
Oh my word.
And she looks amazing. And again, the biggest thing isn't the weight, but she talked more about the non-scale victories. It's not the 208 pounds. It's the fact that she can actually keep up with her kids now.
Mhm.
She's much more energetic, much more positive mentally, because that was, no pun intended, that was weighing on her. So that's just one of the many stories. But we have others that, that was just a recent one, but there are others that have lost a significant amount of weight and have kept it off for 5 years, or longer. So those are the real wins, and the real wins are that someone doesn't have to be embarrassed by getting an extra clip on an airplane, or they can get down on the floor and play with their grandkids. That's the hope that we can give to a patient that says, I've tried everything, I'm ready to give it up, but it's not their fault. It is actually a physiological mechanism that we can change.
Mhm.
So that's what I love about this program, and it really does bring smiles to people's faces.
Now, if you wanted to share one message in summary of the last 45 minutes, what would that be for our audience?
The one message I'd want to share with all of you out there is that this is not going away. It's getting worse. This obesity epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. And that, again, I've said it a few times during this podcast, but it's not your fault. It is physiology and environment not meshing together.
Right.
And there is hope for you. There is hope for you, and we can help you.
Mhm.
That's the one thing I would want to say. And it takes a village, right? So we've got to, my next step is probably getting involved with childhood obesity and getting into the schools and moving, just information. What I've done is recently I've just embarrassed myself, but I've done vlogs.
Yeah.
on LinkedIn about the whole obesity issue, and they're awful, but but I'm
But it gets it out
stepping
there.
outside of my comfort
Yeah.
zone.
That's
Right?
good though.
Yeah, I'm stepping outside of it. Vulnerability, as Brené Brown says, is a
Oh,
good
I
thing.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So then, if people want to continue this conversation with you, how
Sure.
do they get in touch with you?
Oh gosh, I'll give my cell. No,
We'll put it up there.
They could contact my office in Fairhaven, Barley Wellness. They could contact me personally on my email. I don't know if I'm opening up a can of worms, but it's dbarley, just the soup, at barleywellness.net.
Perfect.
So if anyone wants to, I'd be glad to speak to them more about it.
That's
We'll
great.
post
Yeah.
those
Yeah,
on
we'll
our
post that
site
later
too.
on.
Okay. Thanks.
Excellent.
Great.
Great. Well,
Thank
this
you.
was a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I want to once again thank our sponsor, Bay Coast Bank, which is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. And of course, Primary Care also, we'd like to thank them for also supporting our efforts. And of course, we want to thank you because
Yeah.
it was a wonderful discussion.
I
So apt and so important.
I really appreciate it, Chris and Nancy. This is great. And I want to say out there, if anyone is interested in learning more about it, my other position is to help other physicians with our medically supervised protocol. So I'd gladly help them too. Thanks so much. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
It was really
Thank
good.
you.
And everyone, if you do want to view this again, it's on our Facebook page. It'll be on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. You can also watch it there. You take care. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye now.